The most popular power tools sold today are drills and impact drivers. They might look the same, but most people have no idea how different they truly are. I'm going to help you decide which one to buy, cover all of their confusing features that are often misused, and discuss if one brand is better than the next. We're going to spend almost the entire video discussing the differences because drills and impact drivers share very little in common. In fact, the only similarity is a variable speed trigger, meaning the harder you press, the faster they spin. On a drill, bits are held in place with these adjustable jaws that are known as the chuck. And the nice thing is, all modern versions are keyless, meaning once you get it centered and locked in, the final tightening can be done by hand. And you want to hear that clicking noise. Because this chuck is adjustable, it can accept a variety of shank styles. The two most common are smooth and hexed, and sizes. Drill bits can go as small as a 1/16 of an inch all the way up to a 1/2 inch. Now, if you've looked at purchasing a bit set for sinking screws, you might be confused by the different sizes. The larger power bits can be set right into the chuck and provide a nice amount of room for you to see what you're working on. These tiny little guys are known as insert bits, and while you can technically lock them directly into the chuck, they're made to be used with a bit holder because popping these in and out is much faster than unlocking and locking the chuck every time. Speaking of speed, a driver uses a quick release collet that only accepts a hex shank. The standard size is a 1/4 of an inch. We're going to talk all about this in a moment, but you want to use impact rated bits with a driver, and they typically look just like this. They have a thin shaft in between the hex and then the head here, and some sort of a colored band. The thinner portion is actually designed to flex, which keeps the bit from snapping because impact drivers create so much torque. Now, if you ignore that advice and you roll the dice by using something like this power bit, you run the risk of it shattering, and then your 5-minute DIY project turns into 50 trying to dig the broken pieces out, and that's if you're lucky. As always, there's going to be links below to all the products that I suggest. Drills are designed to spin a variety of bits at continuous speeds and torque depending on what setting you've got all these numbers adjusted to. And this is where it completely falls apart for the average beginner or home hobbyist. Now, behind the chuck is an adjustable dial that is known as a clutch. Contrary to popular belief, this does not adjust the speed. We're going to talk all about speed later. Now, I'm going to oversimplify this for the video, knowing that the well-actually commenters will provide full dissertations on the physics below, but all drills create torque, which is the amount of force that is transferred to your bit. Now, imagine that you're trying to open a jar of pasta sauce. Torque is how much force it takes your arm to twist off the lid. The tighter the lid is on, the more torque your arm needs to apply. That was a lot of torque. Now, speed is just how fast you turn the lid, and the faster you twist, the sooner that you can make some meatballs. It's actually pretty good sauce. Now, in general, torque is a very good thing, and different battery platforms like to advertise as having more torque than competitors. But too much torque can be really bad. Have you ever driven a Phillips head screw into something, and it all happens so fast, but the next thing you know, the screw stops, but the bit keeps spinning, stripping the screw head, or if you want to impress your friends that really won't care, it's called a cam out. And that's the result of too much torque. Thankfully, the clutch control takes care of all that. All drills come with at least 2 modes. Sometimes they have 3. I'm going to discuss these other 2 later, but watch what happens when I position this into drive and adjust the clutch setting to 1, which is the least amount of power. Now, everything is going great, and then you get that familiar grinding noise. And don't worry, it's not your drill breaking. This is actually a good thing. Internally, there is a spring-loaded plate that pushes against some steel balls, and then once you hit the max torque, those balls engage with part of the gear, which is that noise that you're hearing, and it stops the bit from spinning. So really, the clutch setting is just adjusting the tension on that spring. Now, when I move it to 5, notice how much deeper the screw sinks, but it's still sitting a little bit too high. One last adjustment up to 15, and that seats the screw just barely below the surface, which is perfect. So now I can finish these other 2 off, and they'll be almost exactly the same depth, which is perfect when you're sinking a lot of screws. You don't want to have to worry about overdriving. The big disclaimer here is that the clutch setting is going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. It's also going to change depending on the material that you're working with and the size of the screws. So always start low and then work your way up. In fact, some of these newer and higher end drills have an electronic clutch, and instead of the noise that you get with a mechanical, these are much more polite, to say the least. So friendly. Now, a lot of people like to stay away from the electronic clutches because they don't think they're as consistent or as reliable as the mechanical one. I actually have no opinion on the matter because I've never tested them, so let's find this out together. I'm going to drill a series of screws with both and then we'll see what happens. These are set on the lowest clutch setting, which should be easy peasy. Now, speaking of easy peasy, I've recently decided to bypass the most difficult decision my wife and I make every day. What should we eat? Because we both say, I don't care, and then we veto every option, which leads to takeout or cooking the same three things. So I've recently started using Factor to avoid always eating the overpriced takeout meals or copy and paste what we cook every week. Because Factor delivers chef-crafted, high-quality meals right to my front door, and the best part is they're ready to eat in 2 minutes. Seriously, it tastes really, really good. All right, I'm going to adjust both of these to 5 and see what happens. Factor has over 35 meals to choose from per week, and if you're looking to eat cleaner, they've got it all. They've got keto, calorie smart, protein plus, vegan. There's also snack options like breakfast smoothies, juices to eat something quick, and you just keep going about your day. So if you're like me and you want to eat something that actually tastes good without all the hassle, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code LSWW50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code LSW50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. And a big thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. I'm not going to pretend like that was the most scientific test in the world, but I do have to say, in this limited run of screws, it seems like the mechanical clutch actually outperformed the electronic in terms of getting consistent depth settings from one screw to the next. So maybe the people who say that these mechanical are more consistent are onto something. I do have another issue that this drill costs about 3 times as much as this drill. Now obviously it has other features besides the electronic clutch, but I would expect it to perform at least the same as this one. It feels a bit like owning a Cybertruck for the person who's never towed anything in their life and only drives to and from soccer practice. But regardless of the electronic or mechanical clutch, I'm going to adjust this to max torque and demonstrate another issue once the screw bottoms out. Now with Phillips head, it would just completely strip. However, when you're using a Torx, all of that force gets transferred from the bit to your wrist, and in certain situations there's so much torque it can actually break a bone. That's why you see bigger bits and drills being used with a secondary handle, which is actually a perfect segue back over to the benefits that you get working with an impact. Like a drill, drivers spin a bit. However, when they encounter resistance, something entirely different happens inside. And the easiest way to explain it is that the motor engages and then disengages repeatedly in fractions of a second instead of the continuous force that you get with a drill. Pretend like the screwdriver is a bit from an impact and then everything above is happening on the inside. And once resistance is felt, a hammer is hitting the wrench in fractions of a second, which sounds like really oddly satisfying. And that rotary impact has some major benefits, because unlike the drill, all of that force that was straining your arm and wrist instead just goes directly to the bit. So it's much easier to use while creating almost double the amount of torque. And then last but not least, because it's continuously spinning and then not spinning in fractions of a second, every time it stops spinning and you're applying force downwards, the bit resets into the bottom of the screw head, which keeps it from stripping or camming out. So the smaller, overcompensating driver packs way more of a punch than the sophisticated drill, which allows it to sink significantly larger screws and bolts without even needing a pilot hole. And this is the same size screw. I've got max torque on the drill. It's a much different result compared to the impact. And this is one of the main reasons that impacts have become so popular since they were introduced, especially in the trades. However, there are some drawbacks. Much like your guy or gal on your high school team that tried way too hard at everything, including PE, a driver doesn't know when to stop, meaning it's just going to keep going straight down until you pull your finger off the trigger. So you can't start daydreaming with this one, especially if you're using those annoying small screws that are included with your DIY birdhouse purchase. It's going to snap the head off very easily because it's so overpowered. Now, my main impact driver that I've had for over 10 years now only has 1 speed. But this fancy one from Milwaukee has 3 speeds and also this bonus self-tapping screw setting, and that's a really nice feature to have if you're someone who works with metal. Now back over to the drill, because I do owe you an explanation on the speed. Nearly all models have multiple gears, sometimes 3, but 2 is more common. The first setting is low speed, higher torque. And a good rule of thumb is if you're using the drill to drive in fasteners of sorts, like a screw, you want to stay on 1. Now gear 2 is a higher speed but lower torque, and this is best for drilling out holes. But if I'm being honest, I forget to take it out of first 98% of the time. If you're going to be drilling, it's much more important to switch to drill mode, which should look something like this. Drill mode disengages the clutch and puts the maximum amount of torque and speed out based on the gear that you're in. And you can see what happens with this Forstner bit if I try to use it in drive mode. The clutch just kicks in right away, as opposed to the drill mode where it's just going to keep spinning all the way down. The final setting, which isn't available on all models, is hammer mode. And hammer mode is meant for masonry or concrete work, and it's actually pretty much what it sounds like. There's 2 gears that start banging into each other on the inside of the drill, and the result is as if you were hitting the back of the drill repeatedly in fractions of a second with a hammer. Now, I'm a woodworker of sorts, so it's not a mode that I use often, but I think it's worth splurging on if you're buying a new drill because it's nice to have for TapCons or other random DIY projects that might pop up. So this begs the question, can you drill with an impact driver? Yes, you can. Now, they aren't technically designed for that, but as long as you're using impact-rated drill bits, which are a little more expensive but much stronger, you're in the clear. Now, my set is over 10 years old, and I have yet to break a bit, which is much more than I can say for the weaker smooth shank. Also, there is no chance I knew what an impact-rated bit was at the time when I bought these, but happy accident, I suppose. So now that you have a better understanding of the differences between a drill and an impact driver, which one of these should you buy? And is there a particular brand that is better than the rest? Let's start with the brand. I have been and will always be a firm believer that the average hobbyist or DIYer simply doesn't use their tools enough to notice a difference in performance between all the usual suspects like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, Ryobi. They all work, and ask yourself, if one brand happens to sink a screw 1.2 seconds faster than the next, is that at all meaningful for your weekend project? Instead, look at the secondary tools on a brand's platform and use that to help make a purchasing decision. For instance, I wanted a battery-powered weed whacker and Makita had one, so nearly all of my tools are now Makita. Just pick one and run with it. Which leads us to the final question, drill or driver? If you're on a tight budget and a woodworking hobbyist or up-and-coming DIY star, get yourself a drill first. They can do just about everything that an impact driver can and are much better with those cheap IKEA bookcase screws. Plus, this clutch is going to keep you from destroying that new Swedish masterpiece or your living room. However, if you have some bigger projects coming up and you see yourself using something like heavy-duty 3-inch screws, splurge for a combo kit that has an impact driver and a drill. I really don't believe you should purchase just an impact on its own. Plus, you'll find it very helpful having one set up to drill holes and the other to drive screws when you're in a hurry. And as a bonus, all of these combo kits come with a case or a bag of sorts that you think you're going to use but will inevitably sit in a closet or in a drawer for the next couple of years until you work up the courage to throw them away. I'm personally still trying to get there myself. Hopefully this one helped. We'll see you on the next one.